Okay, first of all, I want to welcome you here and I want to thank you for coming out on such a pretty night. I know it will be awfully easy to sit at home on the porch or sit at home in the yard and not come, but I appreciate you for your continued interest and support for these projects that we've got going on in town. Most of you know this has been kind of a long process to get to where we are tonight. A lot of questions have been asked, a lot of answers have been given, a lot of discussions have been had. So I'm just going to kind of open up tonight with a brief overview of how we got to where we are tonight. And then Maria is going to carry you through the next phase of what we're talking about tonight. David's going to talk to you about how all this is possibly going to come together. And then I'm going to talk about at the end what our next steps in the process are going to be. So, as you know, I guess about a year ago now, we applied for and received a community redevelopment feasibility grant from Virginia Housing to investigate public input on possible renovation and redevelopment of this school building. We developed a plan and provided a calendar that walked out over 7 months, which outlined initial conversations, a couple of meetings at the school where we toured the facility, a survey that was out and available for several weeks, evaluation and compilation of the data from the survey, review of those, to a first presentation of an initial conceptual drawing about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, if you will, that we had here on the lawn. Again, community input, community discussion. We had over a typed page of questions and responses that were provided to us in the box that was here for people to write down their questions in. Maria diligently went through all of those, and as we've come back tonight with the revised potential redevelopment plan for the school, just want to let everybody know we've engaged in this conversation with everyone who has made their interest known to us about the building. The folks that came to the meetings, the folks that came here and toured the building with us, the folks that filled out their survey, the folks that put their information on their pages from the last meeting, adjacent property owners. We've tried to communicate with the leaders at both churches, and obviously the biggest people that we've talked to, and more so in recent weeks than we had before, is the food pantry, with a very definite interest in making sure that they had a plan going forward of what was going to happen. So, you know, obviously since this was a 7-month process, we're coming down to the end of it. We're coming down to the end of that survey and community input part. And we want you here tonight to show you what we believe we've heard you say and what we believe that you would like to have here. And then we will go from there. The things that I want to mention to you before Maria starts into the finite details of this. The 4 things that I know that we've heard most consistently since we started this process, and this was reflected in the survey results. The #1 requested use of the building was housing. #1. #2 was some type of a community center and something to engage our youth in the town. Both of those needs are reflected in this presentation tonight. Along with the housing request, there was an extreme amount of concern that this would be a low rent or a housing project. I can tell you that is not the intent of these apartments. These apartments are being designed and developed to be marketed at a market rate for a typical middle-class worker couple or person with the rent starting somewhere around, and it's still early to set the rent, but somewhere projected rent starting around $800 a month and going up, depending on the apartment that you select. Food pantry, big point of concern, and it needed to be. We need to make sure they have a place to be. We actually need to make sure they have a better place to be than where they are now, instead of between 6 or 7 different buildings. And we're going to talk about how we incorporated that in just a few minutes. And then the last thing that I think everybody here tonight and everybody in the community will be happy to hear, obviously this plan calls for removal of the temporary structures that were here for temporary classrooms years ago. And they will not be a part of any projected project moving forward with this property. That's what I think we've heard. I think that's where we are tonight. And I want to introduce you now to Maria Saxton, who's been the leader for this project with Hill Studios. And she's going to carry you through this design and elaborate on how she thinks it, and we think it fits into what we've heard you ask for. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to start down here and just sort of work my way over, if that's okay with you. So I wanted to start first with the survey, just to overview what we heard and the responses that we received. So we had an online survey that was active in January and February. We received responses from 230 community members. 2/3 of those community members either lived and or worked in the town, so had a very direct tie to Clifton Forge and this school.
A little bit louder, I'm sorry, the car traffic is getting to be a little bit louder.
Okay, what if I stand in the middle? Would that help? I'll just point over here. Thank you for letting me know. So the intent of the survey, this was our first pass to identify trends in the community and what you all were looking for. This would inform, like I said, the first pass of our initial design concept, which we shared with you all at the open house a number of weeks ago. Overwhelmingly, like Chuck had said, the trend was that the community was looking for a youth and event center and housing. We also heard concerns about parking in the neighborhood, so this is something that we wanted to make sure we addressed, and the need for housing that was ideal for students and healthcare professionals in particular. So the initial design overview, I know a lot of y'all were familiar with it. For folks who weren't here, I just wanted to recap that for you briefly. Our first pass at the design concept included looking at where in the building housing would make the most sense and where it made the most sense for a youth and event center. So the existing gymnasium, I'll walk over here, we're showing this as the youth and event center. So top image here shows it as an event center, bottom as a youth center. We envision this to be a very multi-purpose space. And then we also had proposed utilizing the modular units in the rear of the property as senior housing. Additionally, we looked at putting the food pantry in the area below the stage in the gymnasium. So that was our first pass at the design concept. The feedback we received from the open house was that the food pantry realistically needed more space. The number that we heard was closer to 5,000 square feet, which wasn't feasible for what we were proposing, so we got creative, as I'll share with you all shortly. We also heard that the modular units that the food pantry is currently using are not in the best shape, and they weren't very realistic for converting into senior housing. Parking was still a concern. Folks wanted the parking to be closer to the school and have ample lighting for safety, especially at night. We also had a few people ask us for more details on the apartments, so such as square footage, possible layouts, and possible rents ranges. So how did the design change? First, I'll begin with what didn't change. So we kept the youth and event center and supporting spaces like the kitchen and the multi-purpose tutoring classrooms and worker space here. So this part did not change. Inside of the building itself, we explored possible apartment layouts in more detail, and you'll see these here, over there, and over here. So just a quick breakdown of what we prepared. We have 17 apartments proposed in the current design. One apartment is a studio apartment. 13 of them are one-bedroom apartments, and one is handicapped accessible. 3 are 2-bedroom apartments, and the smallest apartment, which is a studio apartment, is 570 square feet, and the largest apartment is 2-bedroom, and that's 930 square feet. And to echo what Chuck said, we looked at rent prices, and generally they would rent for $800 and above, depending on the size of the unit. Additionally, you'll see here, if you're studying this a little bit, and feel free to come up afterwards and ask us any questions about the layout. We kept as many of the existing walls as possible so that a potential developer would have the opportunity to utilize historic tax credits. So what this essentially means was that we were working within the confines of the existing classrooms for those apartment layouts. So now, let's talk about the site. And actually, I'm going to back up real quick. This is a conceptual illustration of one of the apartments. So this is the top floor of the 1926 building right over here, looking out over where the existing food pantry is. Just a couple features that we wanted to make sure we're highlighting. We're keeping the existing windows, the existing ceiling, and in this case it has really nice hardwood floors that they're showing as refinished. So the site itself, so after the open house events, we had one of our architects come out and take a detailed look at the modular units, and he agreed that while if you had a lot of money you could renovate them, it just financially wasn't very feasible. So we discussed, the town and I discussed the possibility of demolishing them and opening up that space for parking. So this is a quick before and after. So for y'all who weren't here, this is what we originally had proposed. So you see the existing modular units, and here we're showing them as in parking in its place. So in this scenario, parking is immediately adjacent to the building, and we're also proposing ample lighting to make this space safer. The other big change is the food pantry location. It was suggested that we explore a concept to show a new construction food pantry where Mr. and Mrs. West live, who are the current managers of the food pantry. And so in this revised aerial, we are showing a new construction, 5,000 square foot, single level, new location for the Clifton Forge area food pantry. And key to this success is the phasing. So I'll invite David to walk us through the phasing of that.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that happened as we started studying the school is, you know, where does the food pantry go? It's one of the great resources of Clifton Forge, and so the idea would be, if they were here, then this parking could be used for the food pantry during the day and for residents of the apartment buildings in the evening to supplement its. We have 36 spaces in this lot, in addition to all the on-street parking. So 36 more spaces than are there today. So we started thinking about the phasing, and this is just looking straight down from the satellite. You know, here's our school building. It's an L shape. Here are the food pantry buildings, the modular units, and then over here is the corner block, corner being church. So the first phase would remove the house that's on the corner. Food pantry continues in the modular units, and then while this was going on, some work could begin inside the school to renovate it. Phase 2, with the building gone, the food pantry can be constructed on that corner lot, and then after that's finished, then the modular units can be removed, and that can be developed into parking. Phase 3 shows a complete plan, you know, completed food pantry, completed school, completed parking. So, you know, we just want to make sure, this was a discovery for us. We started working on the school. You know, the food pantry is a great resource for Clifton Forge. How do you accommodate that and make it even better while we're working on this? So that's really how the phasing could work. So we've tried to be very we've tried to capture what you guys want and put it into a set of documents that we can take and give to Chuck, and then he can take and tell you the next steps. So Chuck, I'm going to hand it to you to finish up.
So, first of all, let me just say, one of the big questions that has come up at every gathering, what are you going to do how are you going to relocate the people who you're disrupting or who you're moving out? We're not moving anybody out. The only property that we're talking about right now that would be impacted will be the house on the corner of B and Church, and that is a negotiation between the town and the owners of that property. If nobody's forcing any eminent domain, it will be strictly a purchase on the open market, just like two people buying from each other. But it will be being purchased for the purpose of making room for the new food pantry building. Other than that, no other inhabited properties are going to be impacted. And the ideal thing that, as David said, the food pantry can stay where it is until they're ready to move into the new building. So that makes as seamless a transition as we can possibly do. So the question is, what's next? The next thing would be to present this to town council, which will be done at our next month's council meeting. Hopefully obtain the approval of council for us to provide an RFP, which is request for performance, professional performance, to locate a developer for this property. We have several developers in mind that we want to talk to directly, but we also want to make sure it's opened up on the open market for any developer that might be interested in the project to come forward. Once a developer has been selected and while we're in the negotiations with that developer, there will be protections placed in the contract with that developer for both the community, the town at large, the history of the school, the neighborhood in particular, and the one thing that will be in any contract with any developer that we move forward with or decide to move forward with is that the name Jefferson must be included in the future naming of whatever they put in this building. The other thing that I want to point out, though, is this is a conceptual plan from the town and one developer. The developer that takes on the project is probably going to accept this with open arms because the big part of his job's already done. But he may need to come back or want to come back and suggest changes that he thinks will be more appropriate in the building. Bottom line is, and we talked about this at length just now, these plans have been adopted from input from the community and hopefully approved by the town. That same process will have to be followed for any changes that any future developer would want to make to the plans. They would go back through a process of being presented to the community input, reaching some type of a compromise with the community input and the developer, and then town approval before it would be accepted. Okay? The other thing that I think everybody needs to realize, and I had to realize this too, is we're talking about two separate projects. We're talking about the initial project where we're working with the school building and redevelopment and renovation of that. The second project, completely separate from the school renovation, is the food pantry structure. Completely separate project. Obviously, they're going to be going on simultaneously, working side by side. The developer will be handling development of the school property. An architect, engineering group will be handling the building and development of the food pantry with very close and strict input from the folks that are running the food pantry. And I'm meeting with them and Maria tomorrow afternoon to start the funding process of identifying appropriate funding, locating that funding, and applying for that funding to bring the food pantry part of this, or the food pantry project, to a reality. That's kind of where we are. Hopefully we're moving forward in a positive manner for everyone concerned. It's going to be an improvement to the community, an improvement for the town, offer more housing, a brand new state-of-the-art location for the food pantry and all of the folks that they serve, 36 more parking spaces than you already have. So that is a goal, to get the parking for the food pantry off of church parking lots, really predominantly off of the street. You know, you've got 17 apartments, 37 parking spaces, so you already have more parking than you've ever had available just by moving the modular structures in the back. So that's where we are. This is the conceptual drawing that we would like to present to council, and then ultimately present to the potential developers for this project until we can recruit one that we feel is the right fit for the town, the community, and the school building.